Stand by.
Season's greetings once again. Welcome to another episode of Ghosts Are Near, where we discuss various aspects of the paranormal and paranormal exploration. I am your host, Keith Johnson. I am also the founder of New England Anomalies Research, otherwise known as N.E.A.R. With me is my co-host, Andrew Graham, who happens to be a senior member of N.E.A.R.
Good evening.
Glad to have you with us, Andrew, all the way from New Hampshire.
Absolutely. It was a fun ride down. Got caught in a little traffic, but I think we're ready to go and have some fun tonight.
We're going to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you coming all the way down here. I hope it was a safe ride. I know you got stuck in some traffic and there was an accident, and that's the usual par for the course.
Yeah, it's, you know, when you're dealing with Providence traffic, that's usually kind of how it goes. I've never been through the middle of Providence on a smooth journey, so, you know, hey, you take it as it comes.
Right. By the way, Sandra and Carl are here with us tonight. They're just doing some work behind the scenes, but they're here. Right?
That's true.
And as we begin, we have a very interesting topic tonight, but first I'd like to read a fan email which we received from Atlanta, Georgia. And it reads, I just spent the afternoon watching your first 8 shows on Google Video. Your shows are thoughtful, intelligent, and honest. I truly enjoyed them all, especially the interviews with Andrew Graham, that would be you, and Denise Jones. I am a fan of Ghost Hunters. That's how I knew your work. Thanks for such an intelligent show. Keep up the great work. Sincerely, Robin. And I think that's so nice to get an email like that. Don't you agree?
It's lovely. Just
Yes.
to set the record straight, I'm Andrew, I'm not Denise.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
So, our topic tonight is the subject of Rhode Island vampires. Now, believe me, we did have our history of supposed vampires. However, they were not the kind that you see portrayed in Hollywood. It was a total belief system altogether. Now, what do you know about Rhode Island vampire case histories, Andrew?
The Rhode Island vampire case histories, the little bit that I know is really more along the lines of being akin to maybe, say, the Salem witch trials, where they had a mass hysteria based on misconceptions and misunderstandings. The vampire legends, or the vampire cases, are in a sense the same. They can be kind of in the same line with that. However, my understanding is that there's also some possible fact of some possible paranormal goings on to those as well. It's very interesting, some very interesting stories.
Yes, very interesting stories. And Sandra and I recently made a visit to some of the cemeteries associated with these legends. Now, as I said, they are legends, but they are based on actual facts as well. These people really did live and die here in the state of Rhode Island. In fact, Rhode Island was once known as the vampire capital of America, believe it or not. Vampire capital of
That's a new one on me. I actually was totally unaware of that. So that's really
the
interesting
United
to know.
States. And however, in Vermont and New Hampshire, this practice did go on. Now, the practice was basically there would be families afflicted with diseases which we know as tuberculosis or cholera, whereas one family member after another would become ill and would die. Now, the practice was to find the spiritual culprit who was responsible for taking the life forces of the family members. To do this, they would disinter family members and look for an incorruptible. One of the family members who perhaps was not as advanced in decomposition as the others, there they believed the vampire spirit inhabited and was living on the life forces of sleeping relatives. Now, you don't hear much about that today, and it certainly doesn't go along with the concept we have of Hollywood vampires and how they're portrayed in movies and on stage. And
there is a total subculture in the world now, also of people that claim to be vampires. And
yes, very true.
They do go so far as to drink blood, and some people have actually even said that it can be drawn right down to a matter of some sort of anemia, where they need the iron in their blood to be able to do it. But there are people that live like those, the traditional. The traditional representation of the vampire, people tend to live up to that.
Yes, such as the Nosferatu.
Yep, the Nosferatu, the whole Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, things like that. There are people that will avoid sunlight. They'll go out only at night. Some of them even sleep in coffins, and they will drink blood. They don't kill people, but they'll get their blood from animals or whatever and drink it out of cups. And it's an entire lifestyle and religion to them.
True, and some people actually have a psychological dependence on it, I believe.
I believe so. I don't know too much about that, but I believe that there is some sort of a dependence on that lifestyle.
Then, of course, there are psychic vampires, people who happen to drain energy from other individuals for one reason or another. Just some people, you're around them and you feel very, very drained. And some people aren't even aware that they're doing this.
Absolutely.
They just seem to feed off these psychic forces. And usually, as I said, the individual will not be aware that they're doing this. Sometimes they are aware. But anyway, we do have some footage of the investigation that Sandra and I went on. We visited 3 separate cemeteries. We're going to start with the Exeter Cemetery, where Mercy Lena Brown is buried.
Outstanding. Mercy Brown.
Yes, you've been there.
Absolutely.
You know of her.
I know of Mercy. We're old friends.
Oh, yes.
So to speak.
Seems like that. Well acquainted.
Yes.
So, if we could bring that footage up now, we'll take a look. This is the gravestone of Mercy Lena Brown. She died January 17th, 1892. Age 19 years. Very popular spot here. I see people have decorated this, probably for Halloween. No scripture verse or any poetry. I guess under the circumstances, people back then in 1892, considering what happened, may have thought it inappropriate. Mercy's mother, Mary Eliza Brown, died in her mid-30s, December 1883. 6 months later, Mercy's older sister, Mary Olive, died at age 20. Presumably, they died from tuberculosis, otherwise known as consumption. There were no more illnesses for several years. And then, around 1890, her brother, Edwin, began showing signs of the same disease. he and his young wife, Hortense Hines Brown, went to Colorado Springs at the doctor's suggestion to drink of the mineral water there. And for some time, his condition improved. Seemed he was going to recover. Unfortunately, several months later, he had a relapse. Began failing in health once again. Meanwhile, Mercy Lena, for herself, preferred the name Lena. She went by her middle name. Also contracted the illness. And hers was of the galloping kind. She wasted away pretty fast. She died in the wee hours of the morning on Sunday, January 17th, 1892. This is the keep, or holding crypt, where Mercy Brown's body was placed, because the ground was too frozen to bury her in January of 1892. Mercy's brother Edwin did return to Rhode Island from Colorado Springs. There, of course, was a prevailing belief at the time that something other than natural causes would be causing these deaths, multiple deaths. It was believed that an undead spirit inhabited one of the bodies and would come out at night and feed off the life forces of living relatives. Not necessarily the blood, but the life energies. And so, in March of 1892, Edwin Brown returned from Colorado Springs with his wife, stayed at the home of his in-laws. There was a meeting held. Mr. George Brown was met with by some of his friends, members of the Exeter Grange, and they informed him that it might behoove him in his best interest to search for the body in which this demonic undead spirit was inhabiting. The only way to do that was to disinter the bodies of his family members who were already deceased. Historical Cemetery, number 14, in Exeter, Rhode Island, burial place of the Tillinghast family. This is the headstone of Honor Hopkins Tillinghast.
Looks like it's seen better days.
Yes, it is kind of toppling over, and this whole cemetery here is sorely in need of some upkeep. But of course, she was married to Snuffy Stukely Tillinghast. It's called Snuffy because of the brown overcoat he always wore, which was said to resemble the color of snuff. They were blessed with 14 children among them.
They were very busy.
Yes, very, very busy. And Snuffy supported his large family predominantly through orchards of peach and apple trees. And he usually had a bountiful harvest. Life was going very well with them. However, a blight struck them in 1799. Snuffy had a nightmare, supposedly in which half of his orchard was healthy and half of it was withered and dying. The stench of decay began overpowering him, and he heard his beautiful daughter Sarah calling to him on the wind in his dream, calling Papa, Papa. He looked for her but couldn't find her. He awoke from his dream and he still somehow couldn't shake it. Something about this dream really bothered him, but his wife convinced him it was simply concern over the upcoming harvest. Well, unfortunately, soon afterwards, Sarah, who was the eldest daughter still living at home, became sick. She apparently had caught the consumption, or tuberculosis, and she sickened and died rather quickly. Terrible tragedy. They lost their beautiful, favored daughter, Sarah. And she was buried here. Unfortunately, a short time later, another daughter, Ruth, became sick as well. Ruth was 19 years old. Sarah was 21 years old. But Ruth began complaining of something strange. She told her mother, "Sarah has been coming into my room at night, sitting on my body and making me hurt where she sits." And unfortunately, Ruth soon after succumbed to the disease as well and was buried presumably in the cemetery. And then it seemed that this disease was not only confined to the Tillinghast farm, but in West Greenwich, where Joseph Hoxie lived. He had married Hannah Tillinghast, another one of the daughters. She became ill as well and began complaining of nocturnal visits from her deceased sister Sarah.
Did she also feel heaviness on her chest?
Presumably, it was all the same. They were reporting the same thing, that Sarah was coming into their rooms at night, sitting on their chest and making them hurt. And then another son, Andres, became ill as well. And he also became feverish and complained of his sister Sarah, again coming into his room at night, sitting on his chest and giving him great pain and discomfort.
What do you make of that? Do you think it was the power of suggestion, or maybe the mind trying to make sense of the sensations that were going on while asleep?
That's basically what I would believe, that because they missed their dear sister Sarah and they were suffering from the same illness themselves, perhaps they were somehow psychologically associating it with Sarah. But according to the beliefs at the time, people did take a lot of stock in dreams, and apparently Snuffy Tillinghast began wondering if his dream might be prophetic, if he was destined to lose half of his family, his orchard symbolizing his family. And so finally, Anna herself, who was weary from caring for all her ill children, I guess her resistance was down and she became ill herself. Then she began complaining of her daughter coming into her room at night. And she said, "Soon I will be joining my sweet daughter Sarah because she wants me to be with her." At this point, Snuffy was desperate and he searched for a cure. Someone suggested to him the superstition of disinterring the bodies and looking for an incorruptible. And if one was found in a good state of preservation, perhaps a spirit was using their body as a shell or a husk to feed off living members of the family. There was a case which had happened in Cumberland only a few years before, in 1796, where Stephen Staples obtained permission from the town to disinter one of his daughters to try an experiment, so the records say. And so the belief was in existence at the time. Well, Snuffy Tillinghast, along with some friends and some farmhands, presumably came to the cemetery, began digging up the bodies. The children who had already died were well advanced into states of decomposition. Sarah, however, was an exception, even though she'd been buried the longest. When they lifted her coffin out and opened the lid, they found that her hair and fingernails appeared to have grown. Her eyes were wide open and staring. Her lips had become taut, drawn into what appeared to be a smile, showing her teeth. Now, of course, today we know there are medical explanations for that. Scientifically, the skin begins to draw back as the body begins to decompose, and the decomposition might not be the same as all the others, depending on the level of water in the grave or the air tightness of the coffin. Be that as it may, sometimes the fingernails would appear to have grown because they would have fallen off as the skin peeled back, making them look fresh. So, as much as he regretted it, Snuffy Tillinghast took his carving knife out and did cut her heart out. They burned it right here in the cemetery. Then they reburied her and the rest of the children. One more child did die after that. Actually, she was a grown woman, and that was Hannah. Did die in the year 1800. Honor Hopkins Tillinghast did survive, though, and lived to a ripe old age. And that was the story of the Tillinghasts. Snuffy and his wife Honor and their children.
Very interesting.
As far as paranormal activity in this cemetery goes, there's been some reported, very mild. I know Tom D'Agostino did experience something.
I'm not experiencing anything right now, but I do have my recorder going, so we'll see if we get any EVPs.
Yes.
Hopefully we will.
That we will do. Well, on to our next location.
Let's go.
We're outside of the Plain Meeting House Road Cemetery, officially known as West Greenwich Cemetery, West Greenwich, Rhode Island. Historical Cemetery number 2. This is the Baptist Church, otherwise known as the Plain Meeting House. And this is the burial place of Nellie Louise Vaughn, who died at age 19 in 1889, March 31st. This is the concrete structure I had mentioned that people mistakenly believe Nellie Vaughn is buried in. Some people believe she's entombed here because she was a vampire and she's encased in here to prevent her from getting out. Actually, 2 of Nellie's uncles are buried here, 2 of the Knight family. She's not buried here, but nonetheless, as you can see, there is some heavy damage on it. People keep chipping away at it over the years, hoping to find the West Greenwich vampire buried within. This path.
Okay.
Welcome back. That's our footage. Gee, Sandra really fit the scene there, didn't she? All attired in black. She looked rather goth there, I think.
Yeah, well, you know, she had the gothic ninja type thing going there, and I think that really worked for you know, what you guys were going for.
Oh, that's cool. Now, set the record straight. I myself have never experienced anything conclusive in the way of paranormal phenomena in any of these cemeteries, and I've been to them many times. How about yourself, Andrew?
The closest thing I've ever been, I quite honestly have been to Mercy Brown's grave more than any of the others. The closest thing that I've ever found is I did experience some lights at one point at Mercy Brown. Nothing major, but there were some, you know, lights moving around. It seemed like in the trees.
I see.
Sort of around the perimeter of the cemetery. But nothing that I would even conclusively say was paranormal, because there's also lots of bats.
Yeah, that's true.
So
batty area.
Very, very, very batty.
Yeah. You can see in the footage there's a heavy amount of damage, especially in the West Greenwich Cemetery. And I think that's very unfortunate, especially for people who want to do any serious investigating. That makes it very difficult, and it's very, very disrespectful. It
really is. It breaks my heart a lot of times to see that sort of disrespect. Quite honestly, I mean, the one thing it brings about, it does sometimes bring about paranormal phenomena, but not in a good way. It usually brings about some sort of negative energy.
Right, exactly. And Nellie Vaughn's she's a case of mistaken identity anyway.
Absolutely, and she's been stuck with you know, cult activity at her cemetery for ages since that was mistaken, and
Right.
it's unfortunate because, I mean, haven't they tried to, they vandalized that cemetery?
Oh, terribly,
horribly.
terribly. Well, as I was explaining in the footage, people keep chipping away and sledgehammering away at that concrete structure there, trying to exhume the West Greenwich vampire entombed within, and she's not even buried there.
Yeah, it's not even her grave.
No, they think it's going to be A.K.A. Barnabas Collins, that she's entombed there and sealed
Right.
for eternity. And
Absolutely. I mean, even Mercy Brown. I mean, they've, you know, somebody's stolen her stone a few times. And,
yeah.
You know, luckily they've been able to recover it, but it's just unfortunate that people feel the need to you know, steal a gravestone. I don't
Right.
understand that.
I may have experienced some phenomena in West Greenwich, but again, that's inconclusive. Paranormal investigator Rosemary Ellen Guiley and I were there some weeks ago, and I was giving her a tour of the area because she lives out of state and it's never been there before, although she's written extensively on it. What she didn't know is the legend of Mary Brown. There's another story altogether. It's more of an urban legend, but supposedly Mary Brown lived in the area, and she was not associated with vampirism. She was supposedly a witch that was persecuted in Salem. So the story goes, but supposedly she had 2 dogs, and these 2 dogs appear from time to time, but they will not go in the cemetery gates.
Oh, okay.
One's kind of a larger dog, and one's a smaller, like mongrel type. Well, we were there, and suddenly there was this larger dog. There was 2 dogs, a larger one and a smaller one. The larger dog barked twice, but would not enter the cemetery gate.
Oh, cool.
And then just turned around and kind of sauntered off. We didn't hear it run away. We didn't see where it went. I went running out of the cemetery to see if I could see it. I looked up and down the road, no trace of it. There's just no way it could have gotten out of there that fast,
dog.
you would think. But
Wow.
you know, but Rosemary was not even familiar with that legend, and I filled her in afterwards. So
Hey, it's a possibility.
it's
you know?
a possibility.
The apparition dogs of West Greenwich Cemetery.
Yes, but they wouldn't let us take a picture of them.
No.
And they weren't there long enough. You know,
They never do.
No, they never do. And that's associated with Hell's Gate, which is another urban legend of the
Yes.
area. You know, trying to separate fact from fiction and anything. But,
Right.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's Hell's Gate goes. There's different Hell's Gate
Yeah.
lists too. I mean,
Yes,
there's that
there is.
one. There's
Even
the
in
one
Rhode
right-
Island, there's more than one Hell's
Yeah.
Gate. You know. And
So you hit the gates at a certain order or at a certain time.
yes, then you get like Spidergate Cemetery.
Oh,
and-
Spider Gates. Yep, out in outside somewhere around Worcester.
Yes, right. Yeah.
I have been there in the past. It's very heavily patrolled. It's not exactly the safest place to go because it is dangerous. There are people that hang out there and
Yeah, it's known again for cult activity because of its undeserved reputation. And
yes.
you were chased by a cow there, right?
Yes, actually I was.
We had mentioned that before.
Yep,
yeah.
a couple of friends and myself went down and we were looking for Spider Gates because it's one of those places that's recessed kind of back in the woods, and one of our friends ended up having to leave earlier in the evening, and he left us, myself and Valerie, our friend Valerie, there to search for this place, and we went running through the woods looking for it, and
Yeah.
we were totally in the wrong place. We were a couple of miles away from it, turns out, but we wound up out in a field, and the cows weren't too happy about that.
No, you met up with the horned creatures of the
Yes,
darkness.
which was funny because, I mean, we went through the woods and we wound up in this open field. There were no fences or anything until we tried to get away from the cows, and then there was a barbed wire fence in front of us.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that worked out, but
Just
it
shows
happened.
you never know what you're going to get yourself into.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, on later episodes, we will return to the topic of New England vampires, and especially Rhode Island vampires, my favorites, and we'll do some more detailed investigation. And in conclusion, I'd like to say if you are interested in contacting us, you can do so. Drop us an email at ghostarnear@inbox.com. If you have suggestions for our show or would like to be a guest, or perhaps you're experiencing paranormal phenomena yourself and it may warrant an investigation, as Sandra loves to say, we'll believe you. Well, I want to thank you for being our co-host tonight, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and come back again soon.
Absolutely, will do.
We've got some places to investigate.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the holiday season. As always, God bless.